Riddle me this. Two people lose 20 pounds. One gets healthier and the other gets weaker. What's the difference?
Hmm. Very interesting you bring that up. I have a lot of ideas.
Yeah.
In this society, all we want to do is, it seems like people just want to shrink down, eat less, shrink down. Oh, great. I'm going to take this drug. It'll help me eat less and I'll shrink down and my world will be better and my health will be better.
Mm-hmm.
You can be healthier, but there's a lot of people in this world of GLP-1s and losing weight, not doing it the healthiest way can actually make you weaker and, lead to health issues down the road too.
Yeah. So
Not just weakness, but other stuff.
and what I hear you saying is there's weight loss, can be healthy weight loss or it can be non-healthy weight loss.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the real topic that we want to dive into. One, what might be going on with weight loss that is less healthy? And two, how can we do weight loss in a healthy way? And how can people, GLP-1s are not going away.
Right.
And in fact, I'm happy because that is a huge opportunity for America to get to a weight that is healthy for their body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a great tool that we can use to support a healthy transition to a healthier lifestyle. But we have to do it the right way.
Right.
And so that is what we really want to dive into. So when we lose weight, we're not just losing fat. We are also losing lean muscle mass.
And in fact, that's usually what happens first, or it's a combination where the scale's going down. It could be initially water weight, which could be muscle loss as well, because we know it's very easy to lose muscle quickly. So that's why.
And we talk about that all the time. What is glycogen?
Yeah.
1 gram of glucose, 3 to 4 grams of water.
Yeah. So if you're initially losing weight, you're seeing progress. And that's why the scale is so frustrating, because you could be doing all the right things and you're not losing weight, where it's like, well, maybe that's good because you're retaining your muscle, doing it the right way, retaining muscle. And then after a few weeks, you might see some fat loss.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times you are just naturally going to lose the muscle with the fat, some of it.
And with the GLP-1, I mean, what we're really talking about, like the mechanism is really calorie restriction.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the side effects, like the most common side effects that we hear about is nausea and just like your stomach doesn't really feel good. So
we've gotten better with that too, though, because from talking to different clients on it and stuff, it's like I feel like they're figuring out like the different dosing, the ramp up into the higher doses, being more cautious with that so that that's not an issue, or different drugs work better for different people.
Yeah. And I've also heard that the more recent ones that have the double, and I think now there's like a triple agonist. Like, first it was Ozempic, that was like the single agonist, and then there was Zepbound, and that's the double agonist. And now I think there's a newest one that has the triple agonist. And so I think at least the second generation I've heard has much less of those nauseous side effects from what I've heard. But still, if we are having less food, the food that we have becomes way more important.
Right.
Our selection criteria needs to be very, very sharp. And we're all creatures of habit. So we're all naturally picking foods that, we go to the grocery store and I'll be honest, I'm eating almost the same thing every single day for breakfast.
Well, but that's how you can be healthier too. And it's more sustainable if you find things you like that works, it fits within your macros, it fits within the goals you're trying to create. But it is hard for anyone to get all the nutrients we need, even on a 2,000 calorie diet, 2,500 calorie diet, whatever. And so when we are going into a calorie deficit, whether it's through medications or not, if we're just trying to lose some fat, maybe we're on a slight calorie deficit and doing strength training and we're tracking, it's hard to get the nutrients that your body needs. Meal prep is successful, or like doing the same things day to day is helpful for that. So that you don't so that you always have a plan, because that we know that helps a lot. The psychology of, eating and sustainable habits. But it's hard enough. And that's why sometimes supplements are beneficial. Or even if you're doing all the right things, like I might still recommend a fish oil supplement, because it's just hard to get that in, right? And we're not, with the GLP-1s, it is the calorie restriction, like you said. When it comes to things like bariatric surgery, you can have that malabsorption part as well. So we're not going to talk as much about that, but that's a whole nother thing where protein is even harder, more important. And there's a laundry list of supplements and vitamins to take because they are having that malabsorptive component with part of the colon taken out, them not absorbing all the nutrients they are eating on a very limited calorie diet.
Oof.
With general weight loss or dieting or GLP-1s or, time restricted eating, intermittent fasting. That is all, that's harder and harder to get the nutrients that your body needs as it is. And so if you're having like major calorie restriction with a GLP-1 or your appetite's down.
Or you're going alone.
Or you're going alone and literally starve. It is hard to get the nutrients your body needs. So we have to make sure. So it becomes even more important to see a dietitian maybe, or really think about your diet, because every bite that comes in is even more important.
Or just plan, what it is. Like make a plan. Yeah. So, when we're having dramatic weight loss, you can expect that 30 to 40% of that fat loss of the weight loss is going to be lean mass. Mm-hmm. I think the studies are still showing
Depends on where you're starting out too, the weight, how much weight you have to lose. But yeah.
And I think obviously how much fat you have versus how much lean muscle mass you have is going to determine the percentage of lean muscle mass that you lose. Mm-hmm. I think from what we understand, a lot of the weight that's being lost is primarily fat in the beginning when people have a lot of fat to lose. A lot of
excess fat, yeah.
They have a lot of excess fat. So, definitely, it's definitely, some of the things we're talking about are, unintended side effects. We are all in agreement, though, that the side effects and the problems of being, morbidly obese or just like carrying around a ton of extra weight, it's better to be dealing with these things than to be dealing with those things. Mm-hmm. So overall, we're saying this is a good thing, but we want to be cautious about how we're approaching it and make sure that we're being attentive. And so, when we lose lean mass, not only are we losing strength, but we're losing our body's primary metabolic engine, which is our muscle. Mm-hmm. And we talk about that all the time, how important muscle is for our metabolism, because every time we move, we're burning that glycogen and our muscles are sending out that GLUT4 receptor and just chewing up any available blood glucose that's in there. Yeah. And so we're not having to take it through that lipogenesis or getting it turned into fat storage, because our muscles are just taking it up right away, as well as our liver.
And it's more, you're revving up your engine. As you have more muscle mass, you can get away with having more calories, or you can eat more foods, a wide variety of foods, because you are burning more calories day to day.
And also a big thing about why people are so obsessed with muscle mass and just creating a big tank of muscle is that there will come a day where you need to dip into that rainy day fund. You're going to get sick. Mm-hmm. I remember, I got sick just a few weeks ago, and this thing went around our entire
GI bug.
It was weird. It came.
It was not like the 24-hour.
Yeah. Nobody threw up except Tali. Tali threw up everywhere. Yeah. But almost nobody threw up, but you were feeling nauseous, lots of diarrhea, stuff like that.
Appetite. Yeah.
No appetite for anything. And so I remember I lost 5 pounds. Now there's no way that's 5 pounds of fat. You're losing some muscle during that time.
Yeah. And you're also not eating in bed.
Yeah, just not eating. And so you want to have some extra muscle mass for that rainy day fund when you get injured, when you have an illness that takes you out of the game for a little while. Every week. I mean, in a week is a long time to spend in bed, but there's some studies that show for every week that you spend in bed, it takes you 8 weeks to get back to baseline.
Well, that's why it's so scary when older people that are frail and naturally it's harder and harder to have a lot of muscle when you're 85 years old. But that's why it's scary, because if they're already thin and frail, don't have the muscle. It's scary when they're in the hospital bed or getting injured or having surgery, because they don't have those muscle stores.
And so, loss of lean muscle mass, loss of strength, loss of metabolism, and then that finally is that loss of resilience when things happen. And so, this is especially concerning in people that are over 40, if you're already sedentary, or like we just talked about, if you're post injury, or if you're, something happens to you, you're dealing with an illness, or you develop like a chronic illness. Um, and sarcopenia is already, it's almost something that like no one ever really talked about that much until like the last couple years. But that sort of chronic loss of muscle mass as we age, we know that older people are more subject to that sarcopenia, and that just, frailty is a huge problem and a huge cause of mortality. And so under muscled, under strength, that rapid weight loss compounds that issue. And so
as you're shrinking down, I just say that because it's like the common thing. Oh yeah, I want to shrink down. Like, this is great. But if we don't do it in a planned, strategic, healthy way, this is what you're talking about. Your metabolism is going down. You're losing muscle stores. Whether you're doing things at your best in a healthy way or not, you're going to be losing muscle. But if you don't really get after it, or think about all these pieces of the puzzle, this is what you're talking about. Like, this is the unhealthy way when you're losing a lot of weight. Like, it's not actually going to be as healthy for you.
What do you like? How do you hierarchy the list of priorities for your patients when they're going through dramatic weight loss? Like, what priority do you put things into that they should be thinking about from just a pure nutrition standpoint?
If it's rapid weight loss, like on a drug, or just
I guess it might be interesting to talk about, maybe some of the bariatric patients.
Well, I would say across the board it is protein, because we know you're going to lose muscle already. So protein. All we talk about is protein, I know, but and I even get sick of talking about it, but it is so important. So bariatric world, that was the number one. Well, fluids, because also with volume, same with bariatric surgeries, shrinking the stomach, and GLP-1s, if it's a volume thing or an appetite restriction and slowed digestion, slowed gastric emptying, that's going to impact your fluid too. So when dehydration is very concerning as well. Drinking your water. Yes, sip that water. So dehydration is one that's kind of like, a different category, but not really. And then protein. So we want to avoid losing as much muscle as possible. We know there's going to be some muscle loss, but protein, the easiest forms of protein. I know we've talked about this before, but like the gentler, easier to eat proteins, like that are softer maybe, or you can eat more volume and get more protein. The most efficient sources too. So for some people, like appetite wise and what they're craving after surgery or while on a GLP-1, it might be just getting what sounds the most appetizing to you. But also we want to think about what's the most protein per gram or per ounce. Like what's actually, like, I know you don't love, chicken thighs or chicken breasts, but like shredded chicken breasts is going to get you the most protein for the less amount of food. So you might want to stick with that.
And you're also not getting the fat. And I know that's, kind of, fat is satiating. And so it's going to fill you up. And so if you're having a meat or a protein source that is also really high in fat, you're not going to be able to eat as much of that because you're going to be filling up much more quickly.
Right. And that's a predicament too, because when you lose a lot of weight, you don't want to push the fat. It's going to fill them up a lot quicker. At the same time, we need fat to absorb vitamins. We need fat for hormone function, especially sex hormones. We need fat is so important for our body. So you still want to get some, but maybe at the end of the meal or, doing the order of eating. So I would say fluids, protein, and then I try to get those good micronutrients through whole foods in as best possible. So with limited appetite and less eating in general coming in, focus on protein and produce, like getting some vegetables, getting some fruits, again, maybe in a form that's easier. We don't want to spike the blood sugar all day long. So I'm not saying like a juice or a smoothie, but whatever is easiest to eat more of, like cooked down, steamed vegetables versus a bunch of raw vegetables, right? That's going to be easier to eat and not take quite as much effort and volume. So you definitely get those nutrients in there. But I would also probably recommend, if there's rapid weight loss going on, some form of whole food vitamin to get a little
Hmm.
bit extra in, because it's just going to be hard to get the nutrients your body needs to function.
Yeah.
And then we don't want to be, scared of carbs, but they're kind of like fats. They might fill you up, if you're eating breads and things like that with limited appetite. You might want to save those for the end, or again, get easier to eat carbs or fruits instead of grains, heavier starches.
Yeah.
So let fruits maybe be your carbs instead.
What are the vitamins and minerals that, we're seeing just a little bit more of that are a little bit more concerning? Like, what are the ones that, they're really seeing a big loss of?
I mean, it could be anything. But in general, it's hard to get if you actually log your food and there's an estimate like on an app like Chronometer or something where you can actually see your daily totals. It may not be 100% accurate every day, but there's a lot of nutrients you're probably already low on. So fiber, number one. We know
Mhm.
fiber, but that's, a form of carb. And then things like B12 might be hard.
Mhm.
Our omega fat, our omega 3s, of course, are going to be hard to get in. A lot of people could be low on vitamin A, vitamin C, like these antioxidants and, um, these nutrients that are really important for like our immune system. So it really depends on the person. If they don't eat a lot of meat, then the B vitamins might be down a little bit, or iron might be low,
Yeah.
or
I don't know
I
how,
mean,
like,
it could be anything.
how can you hit your protein goal if you're not eating meat on a GLP-1? That just seems
Protein shakes, I guess.
impossible.
Yeah, that's where
Yeah.
like the liquid might come in. I mean, the liquid might be hard, but for some people, liquid's hard volume wise.
Right.
But for some people, it's also like kind of funnels through your
Yeah.
stomach. It kind of falls
Quicker.
through. So that might be a better, um, especially if you don't have appetite and you need your protein. That's where protein shakes could really come into play.
Mm-hmm. Man, that's tough. So, one of the things I'm seeing, and one of the questions I had, and as I was doing my research, is like, okay, so we're seeing people become under muscled, and like,
Mhm.
what is the next step of that? And it's like, I don't think that there hasn't been a lot of research yet connecting this dramatic weight loss to things like osteoporosis, osteopenia, but I know that the way bones are formed and maintained is through muscle contraction.
Mm-hmm.
And so, naturally, and that's why osteoporosis, osteopenia is more prevalent in older adults, especially under muscled adults. But if you don't have the muscle contracting, then you're not getting the bending forces on the bone, which stimulate the osteoblasts, which are the bone making cells,
Mm-hmm.
to know where to go to fortify and strengthen that bone. And so, like, part of my concern is that, we're dropping the weight, and that's great, but we're also, there's so many people who are just like, almost just like withering away and not really
Yeah.
getting.
I think we haven't hit that. Like it's so new still,
Yeah.
especially GLP-1s, if we're talking more about
Yeah.
that.
And new
And
for
what
like, it's
is
not a new drug, but it's just new for like the
for
wide,
this
for like the
and
wider
and
population.
it's widespread. So it's
Yeah.
like, okay, everyone's like, okay, I can talk about this now.
Hmm.
It's okay. And so many people are doing it. It's normalized and
Yeah.
it's fine. And I don't feel embarrassed or whatever it is,
Yeah.
which is good. And so we're in this new phase where people are using it. Some people I find still struggle with weight loss on it. Some people do very well, but it's like, great, I've lost this weight. I don't have the food noise and everything is great. But we're not thinking about that long-term effect or how it's going to affect, our bodies long term, or we're getting used to the new bodies and, getting the new clothes still and all this stuff. But what are you seeing in the, on the PT side or the
Yeah.
training side of those people who have lost weight, over time and they're not used to it, or maybe, what are you seeing like?
One of the things that's kind of interesting, and it's definitely an association. I can't say like this is research backed or anything, but one of the things I was working with one of my patients that has been taking a GLP-1 and lost, I think, 30 or 40 pounds, and they were having some low back pain that had just sort of crept up, and they hadn't been dealing with it for a while, and then all of a sudden it was like just little things were really causing the low back pain. And it's kind of like, well, I wonder if the core musculature is
Mm.
also part of that either loss or just the
The
change.
anatomy is
Exactly,
changing.
because
Yeah.
when we think about the core, it's easy to just think about the abdominal muscles. So you
Mm-hmm.
have the, rectus abdominis, you have the internal and external obliques, and you have the transverse abdominis that kind of wraps around from the
Which
back to the front.
yeah, I always forget about that's actually like through the back
Yeah,
too.
it's like a corset,
Yeah.
like wraps around like a corset. And then you also have the muscles of the low back. So the multifidi, which are the individual segmental movers of the spine, but also the global stabilizers. And then you have the pelvic floor, the glutes.
I know
I mean,
about
like
that.
all of that. I mean, all of that
Yeah.
really is making up the core, because it's all about your ability to control your pelvis
Mm-hmm.
and support your back. And so when we have really good core strength, we're basically like creating a cone of muscle contraction around the spine that's helping to support the spine. And so, it's always been that when we are treating low back patients, we're looking for imbalances of, tightness and weakness.
Mm-hmm.
But now, again, it's kind of a loose association. But if you think about, like, this is something so common, but when a woman goes through pregnancy, they're having their abs sort of stretched
Separated.
out,
Yeah.
right? Well, it's more just like stretching out, like
Oh,
whether
yeah.
you get that like full separation or diastasis
Mm-hmm.
recti in the front,
Mm-hmm.
they're still like changing the tone of the muscle. I always say that every muscle has an ideal, and I didn't make this up, I learned this in PT school, but every muscle has an optimal length tension relationship. So if we think about length, you're thinking about like point A to point B. So
Mm-hmm.
like just literally the length. And that can be affected by things like posture or
Yeah.
instability, where, for instance, like in your foot, if you pronate a lot, like you're changing that length of that muscle.
Mm-hmm.
But the tone is what's really interesting. So if you think about like point A to point B being a rope, like how tight is that rope?
Mm.
And there's an optimal amount of tone where we can like move freely and things
Yeah.
aren't on all the time, and the muscle is able to contract and relax and just is in a good functional state.
Mm-hmm.
Well, right after pregnancy, this, the core mechanics are all thrown off, because you had one day you woke up and you had
Yeah.
a large belly with a baby inside of it, and then the next day that baby's gone and the core is just like,
Flattened down.
right, it's just there's nothing there anymore. And that same thing isn't happening with weight loss like overnight like it does with
Right.
pregnancy. But with rapid weight loss, especially if you're not also attending to the core mechanics and that coordination of the core,
Mm-hmm.
it's just an easy recipe for low back pain to come on.
Yeah.
And so, I don't even know that it's necessarily like a loss of like core muscle mass, although there's probably some of that going on.
Yeah.
But it's probably just, a changing of the position and a changing of, like you said,
Yeah.
kind of the anatomy, where things were once stretched
Yeah,
out and now
makes
they're
sense.
being, kind of restricted. And so we have to retrain that. We have to focus on the core mechanics. And a lot of people don't know this. This is what's really interesting about low back pain. The core, like to have effective core mechanics, it really starts at the pelvic floor. A lot of people are starting to learn about this, and like,
Yeah.
when I talk to my male patients about pelvic floor exercises and Kegels
Like,
and
I don't have
stuff,
that.
yeah, they're like, yeah, I don't have that. I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
you
you
did.
do.
Like,
It's just
have
not
you
talked
ever
about
have you
as much.
ever have you ever been peeing and you had to like cinch it off really quick? Like that is
Yeah.
your Kegel.
Yeah,
And
you
so
always talk about that as the analogy of a Kegel.
yeah. And so I talked to my obviously my female patients, they all know what a Kegel is, but for it's basically it's your pelvic floor. It's that cinching of if you were urinating, like stopping that urination. That's one way to think about it. But essentially it's that contraction of the pelvic floor. Well, the pelvic floor is working all the time. So like you go to grab the doorknob and pull the door toward you, your pelvic floor is activating like a half second. It's actually less than that. It's like just like a couple milliseconds before you go to actually intentionally pull the door. And that's what grounds your body down, so that you're not pulling yourself toward the door, you're pulling the door toward you.
Yeah.
And so that is your core kind of firing up so that you're stabilized and you can ground yourself and pull the door. So the pelvic floor contracts first, then your transverse abdominis contracts, and then your little muscles of the lumbar spine, so those multifidi. And so without good pelvic floor contraction, without that transverse abdominis, and think it's a reflexive loop of contractions. So the pelvic floor goes, then the transverse abdominis, and then the multifidi. Well, if we've just spent all this time stretching out the multifidi, now we've changed that behavior, you're really interrupting that reflexive loop of contractions. And so now you're relying on your more passive stabilizers, which is the disc and the ligaments, instead of your active stabilizers, which are the muscles.
And I would assume this is related with rapid weight loss. Are people more hyper flexible all of a sudden after they've lost a lot of weight, or or maybe just moving differently in their bodies, so they might be moving in a more flexible way that they weren't used to? Because I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know that flexibility, and so there's flexibility, and then there's mobility in general. And so we tend to think about mobility as it more relates to, or a hypermobility as more relates to how the joint moves, which can be a function of obviously how flexible the muscles are, but it's also some of the stuff around the ligaments and the capsule and things like that. So I don't know that I can draw that conclusion.
Or I guess I'm just thinking about, you have the stomach during pregnancy, right? So you're used to just not being able to move the same way. And then once it's gone, I mean, obviously there's a lot of fluid and it's not totally gone. It takes a little while to lose it. But then people just jump right back into things maybe they weren't supposed to do. So maybe that's more of a mobility thing. But same with losing a lot of weight. If you have a lot of weight, you're not able to move in certain ways.
Yeah, losing I see what you're saying.
You cannot.
A functional mobility.
Yeah, now you can, and you might take it a little bit too far, or pull some stuff, or maybe strain things that aren't used to being stabilized.
I was just reading an article the other day about how people, on GLP-1s and who are experiencing this rapid weight loss are ready to start their life in a certain way. They're at their new athletic lives and enjoy their new bodies, which is what we want, right?
Yeah.
But they may not have the tissue tolerance yet. And so I see this with a lot of my athletes who take an off season.
Yeah.
And they're not doing strength training. They're not loading their joints throughout the off season. They get back, they start running, they get on the field, and boom, they pull a muscle.
Yeah.
And it's just that they haven't been giving their muscles the tissue tolerance to be able to accept those really high ground reaction forces that happen when you're running. I always say people want to run to get in shape, and you need to get in shape to run.
Yeah.
Because every step you're taking is, upwards of 2.5 times your body weight being driven into the ground in single leg stance. So you need to be able to absorb those forces. And if you're someone who hasn't run in a long time and you've had some weight loss and you're okay, I want to get strong, you're probably much better off doing a strength program or resistance program to start than getting into something high impact cardio like running.
Yeah. Because that'd be so disappointing. You lose weight, you're feeling great.
Yeah.
Boom, you get injured.
Yeah.
You're oh my gosh. This, maybe you wouldn't be, maybe you wouldn't gain the weight that you might have used to have gained when you're injured or not as exercising as much. But that's probably a buzzkill. Because you're I was getting back into this and feeling myself. So
and in the weight room, I think it's also important, we talk about all these different, how many reps, how many sets. And I think it's a little bit more of just a mentality thing. When, I am I'm at a weight where I want to gain muscle, lose fat, but I don't really want to increase my weight all that much. So I'm not really doing hypertrophy training quite as much. I'm focusing more on strength and just being able to have muscular endurance.
Yeah.
And so there's hypertrophy training, which is, it's just a higher rep volume because you're tearing the muscle and you're really trying to take the muscle to failure so that you're getting that tearing of the muscle. Then you give it protein and then the muscle rebuilds itself stronger and a little bit bigger. Strength training for strength is typically higher weights and lower reps, and there's more of a focus on that neurological system. So that neuromuscular recruitment system. So you're trying to organize more of your muscle fibers, more of your muscles in that pattern of movement together, coordinating those contractions so that you can lift heavier and heavier weight. And that's how you build strength as opposed to building size of your muscles. For our people who are having this dramatic weight loss, I think they should be prioritizing hypertrophy training over strength training, particularly because if they're having a lot of lean muscle mass, it's probably affecting some of their deep stabilizing muscles. So until they've, like I said, built up that tissue tolerance and, gotten some reps under their belt, then, it's probably more important for them to be focusing on a little bit lighter weight, a little bit more taking reps to failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what would that look like? Like what would be your biggest takeaway, plan for someone if they had lost a lot of weight? What type of training would that be? Or what type of classes would that be? What would that look like? Like HIIT training, circuit style training, or no?
I don't think I would do HIIT. I think I would, because that's going to be usually that's a little bit more like high impact.
Yeah.
And then,
and if it's quick, and it may not be as many reps, like you're saying, the hypertrophy.
Yeah. And it's also like sometimes we have these, post-pregnancy type workout classes that are like a lot of burpees and jumps and stuff. And me, I'm like, number one, you've just like filled your body with elastin, which is a hormone that makes your ligaments looser so that you can pass the baby through, right? Through the pelvis. But two, like your core is not ready to accept those loads yet. So we really need to focus, like I said, on more, I hate to say like doing more machines and stuff, but things in a seated position, lower loads where you're making sure that you have good stability. I would probably still do more of my typical like split where I prioritize like a hip dominant pattern one day with a mixture of, and what I mean by that is like more of your deadlift pattern, and then with a mixture of accessory work of vertical pulls and horizontal presses, some good core exercises, and then another training day prioritize more knee dominant patterns, so more of your squat pattern with the opposite pull. So if I just said horizontal pull, then I would say vertical pull and horizontal presses. And so but still doing the weights in a way where you feel like you have a lot of control and you're kind of taking the rep volume up to whatever it is where you have like 1 or 2 reps left in the tank, but you can't do like 3.
Yeah.
Right. And so that might be 12 reps. That might be 15 reps. And maybe you do 3 to 5 sets of that. But, when we're talking about like trying to build strength, you're probably doing like 3 to 5 reps.
Yeah.
And you're really pushing the weight. Yeah. So that's what I would say to start with. And then after a couple months, as you've like developed some of those motor programs and gotten used to that, then you can start like increasing the weight and dropping the reps down, depending on your goals.